Might be able to change it. Hang on, audio.
Hello and welcome everybody. I'm here with Jessica Lorimer, my friend, my entrepreneurial friend. We got to know each other. Is it a year?
I know. I think it's longer actually. I don't know.
Longer. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. I really want to talk to you about how things have been for you in the last, is it 9 months since COVID hit? Because you serve a market B2B. And that's a little bit different. And they may have some other struggles.
I don't know whether it's just me.
You can't hear me?
No. I will happily tell everybody what I'm doing about coronavirus. I'll just lip read for the minute. But yeah, so I'll let you fix your audio or microphone. And in the meantime, I will talk about Corona, I guess. I'm going to ask you to nod if that's what you want me to talk about.
I can see my microphone is moving.
I'm really excited, obviously, to have a chat with everybody because I think Corona has gone on for such a long time now that it feels like it's been never ending up until this point. And I know that a lot of people, in fact, I was running a training session with some of my clients today on the fact that we basically have not had any breaks in our time or, momentous periods that help us track time and help our brains track time. So it feels like it's just been one long and simultaneously ridiculously quick period. But when coronavirus hit, I'd actually just pivoted my entire business and I was taking it in a new direction. Before that, I'd been teaching sales psychology to the business to consumer, the individual world, and that had been great. And we'd been running funnels and automated traffic, and we'd done really, really well in that space. And I'd been teaching my private clients how to sell to corporates. And it was only something I was doing with one-to-one private clients and high-level clients. And I was really, really enjoying it. I was loving seeing the results that people were getting. I come from that corporate background. So at the time Corona had hit, I'd actually just taken the entire business. We just stopped selling entirely the sales psychology for consumers and had just gone all in on we're only going to teach people how to sell business to business. And so actually it was a really, really weird thing to come off. We'd just done like our first launch and we'd opened the doors to our signature program. We'd enrolled 25, 26 people at that time. And suddenly COVID hit and we had to navigate it very, very differently. So it's been a bit of an interesting 10 months, actually.
Yeah. You still not hear me? Does
still
people...
can't hear you.
I'm having my husband check. I'm like, Martin, come and check. Do you hear me?
Right. Let me see if, hang on. Let me go. There we go. I've just changed my audio, so maybe that's working.
Yeah. Do you hear me now?
There we go. I've got you.
So maybe it was
my audio on and off, and I'm like, it's working.
So you had just changed it, but wasn't B2B like a difficult spot to be in March?
Well, it was weird because obviously, as with any crisis, you always have that initial period of panic where everybody completely freezes and looks at what have we got to do and almost battens down the hatches in a way. And I think with a lot of corporate organizations, the big feeling was we don't know what's going to happen. But actually the great thing about selling B2B and about working B2B is that companies are designed for risk. They're designed to take on particular risk. They're designed to survive different crises. And so actually, from my perspective, I knew then that my clients couldn't have been in a safer position because I knew that companies, even if they initially froze, they were going to be moving. They were going to be overcoming. They were going to be adapting. They were going to be doing things differently. And so right from the beginning, I took the attitude with my clients that we were going to overcome, we were going to adapt, we were going to keep moving. And actually that paid off really well. And so we are here sort of 10 months later and all of my clients have been selling and they've been succeeding. And we've seen, 30K deals, 60K deals, 50K deals. And we've seen people make their first sales and, £500 deals that are just as important because perhaps they wouldn't have been able to move otherwise in the B2C space. So it's been really, really interesting. And actually, I think it's been a lot safer B2B because it's able to be predicted revenue and it's repeatable revenue and it's something you can track, it doesn't rely on any other platforms. And that's been really, really positive.
Yeah. Yeah. With everything going on with Facebook and the changes with iOS, I guess your clients are not affected.
Exactly. And that's been awesome, and it's really nice actually because I think once the pandemic really set in, there was, I don't know about you and how you feel about this, but I think there was this expectation that entrepreneurs would show up for free and give tons and tons of content for free and like farm it out. And I don't know about you, but my newsfeed was just full of people being like, I'm going to do this for people for free. And I'm going to do this for people for free. And so subsequently, the people who were selling felt like they were being really horrible because they're like, well, I'm not going to give you things for free. And the people who were giving for free were expending tons and tons of energy on things that were not generating sales in the time they most needed them to. And so actually it was really, really nice that my clients who are selling B2B, they're not having to create as much content. So actually they weren't part of that farm of we need to do this or we need to do that. And they could just focus on proactively generating the leads that they needed to help them be making the sales that were going to be most useful for them and keep their businesses going.
But I heard from so many people who were in B2B before that, contracts got canceled or things were put on hold or maybe you had a contract in, but it wasn't signed, like it wasn't even started, the project, and they didn't know when to do it. Like, I guess when you say B2B, you're meaning they could still deliver the services maybe through online. So there was not like you didn't have to be present, like team development and things like that. A lot of that.
We've been adapting and people have been selling that virtually. So I think we had actually quite a lot of people joined my program weirdly in about April because people were experiencing that. So a lot of people who weren't necessarily in the program had been watching from the sidelines, and we had somebody in particular who wrote up a case study for us recently, and she joined because big contracts that she'd been working towards had fallen through, and companies had said we're just not doing this. My dog's sneezing away in the background. We're not doing this, we're not moving now, we're putting everything on hold. And so people were joining the program because they were still seeing other people making sales and thinking, well, how is this working? The reality is that yes, companies did put things on hold in the beginning, but just like everything, and actually perhaps differently in terms of B2C, companies were looking at how can we do this differently. So immediately, almost overnight, companies were suddenly having to put in virtual capability for all of their workers. And that was something that companies had been fighting against for a number of years. So to suddenly see them do that turnaround was huge. And
I loved it.
Opportunity. Well, it was great. It was so much more flexible. And, and that meant that a lot of the people who I'm working with in areas like project management, change management, talent development, executive coaching, like all these kinds of things, were then able to deliver virtually in a more flexible way because it had to happen. There was no option to do face-to-face suddenly. And so companies became more open-minded, not in the initial hit, in March, everyone was freaking out and that was understandable. But from April, companies were very, very interested because at the end of the day, the project still had to happen. The deadline still had to be met. Everything had to move forward. And so actually what I saw from the market, the rest of the market, were there lots of people, they stopped selling. They stopped following up with their corporate contacts. They stopped pushing because they thought that, well, they've cancelled it once, why bother? And actually that meant that the market then was open for a lot of other people. And, so, there was that opportunity to regain that ground.
Yeah. So maybe someone who lost the contract but then gave up versus another person just comes in and like, okay, I'm going to grab them with a different offer, then it's more applicable to this time.
Yeah, exactly that. And sometimes not even different offers. I mean, you can do that all the time anyway. If we look back at, when I was working in corporate sales, one of the things that I always used to do was follow up with companies who had bought from my competitors and say, how did you get on? How did they perform? And it was surprising the amount of business that I would then win because they wouldn't have a great experience. And so the next time they were looking for somebody, they wanted somebody who could provide a better customer experience or better results or whatever. And so I think we have to start remembering that is that, you're going to get told no a lot of times. And that could be no on an initial contract, no on an initial sale. could be no on, we're putting this on hold, we're not doing this now, whatever. But the moment you stop following up is somebody else's opportunity to go in and build the relationship. So if you stop following up entirely because you went, oh, COVID, nobody's doing anything, I'm going to switch my entire business model overnight, that wasn't necessarily, if you were operating in the B2B space, the best thing to do. Because the reality was that those companies were always going to have to fill those contracts somewhere. They were always going to have to make those sales. And unfortunately, you know, the people who were able to keep following up and who were able to follow those sales or core sales principles were then going in and making the money.
It's fascinating how, you know, one person giving up gives an opportunity to another, and the constant follow-up. I've been talking to a lot of people this week about like, can you create an online course if you're in the B2B space? And I'm like, yes, you can.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So they're like, but they're not going to sign up. I'm like, yes, they will.
It's a really interesting thing. I mean, it gets more complex for sure, because obviously it depends on who you're selling to. If you're selling to the end user in an organization, then that's quite simple. And you know, you set up any old online course and on any platform and it's all fine. If you are selling to an organization and you want multiple people within that organization over a longer period of time, so say you wanted to sell a course to an organization that they can use for 5 years, then it's going to be different. It's going to be much more complex because you go into licensing agreements and, you know, performance management and metrics and all that kind of thing. But yes, absolutely. Online education is working for organizations. And what we have to remember is that that's actually not new for organizations. Organizations have always had their own internal learning management systems. They've always had internal trainers and learning and development teams who have rolled out trainings online on computers. You know, it's just that those people happen to have been in an office while they're consuming that material. Now, people are at home consuming that material, but they're still doing it online. So it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, where is that coming from then? You know, you must also hear that from your clients that they're resisting this, like online courses will not work, or why should I do a webinar and all those things, but it still works.
Yes, it does. I think it's about the way you sell it. And like I say, it's about who's going to be using it. So if you're selling directly to an end user, so say you are setting up, I don't know, say you're setting up a style course, and you're setting up a style course for executive leaders to help them feel more confident or more assertive. And you're selling it directly to the end user, technically you're selling B2C because you're selling to that person, even though they work in an organization. And so actually running webinars for them is going to be successful and easy. Developing an online course for them is going to be successful and easy, or simple, at least if you've got the right support to know how to do that. If you're selling to an organization and you want them, as I was saying earlier, to buy an online course that will train, for example, I sell a sales course to companies. So we sell a version of the program that I sell to entrepreneurs. We sell that to big companies. And that's entirely online. We don't provide any other support for it other than the actual program itself. And it sits on an internal learning management system, and it's completely then managed by the company. And occasionally we'll go in and we'll train trainers and things like that. But the reality is they've bought that product. It's an online course, and they go and use it. The difference is not necessarily that companies are resistant to that. It's that people don't explain the transformations well enough, and they don't give organizations a clear understanding of how to manage that within their own organization. So when they're selling these online courses, they're not focused enough on what the transformation is ultimately going to be for that organization. And they're also not demonstrating to an organization how anyone's going to do performance reporting. So essentially what they're saying is, buy this thing, you have no way of knowing if it's working or if people are using it, but give us money. And that's the sale. Like we know that people aren't going to buy that, right? That's not why people buy. So I think people have to start thinking differently about the way that they're actually selling. They have to start thinking about being transformation focused. They have to get away from this mindset of it's online. That doesn't make any difference. You could send them, a bunch of files, and they'd, if it's a course, it's a course. The delivery method is not necessarily that relevant. And they have to start thinking about what's the benefit to the customer, or what are the benefits that the customer is looking for here. And if we're talking about companies, they measure everything. So they're always going to be looking for measurements. They're always going to be looking at metrics, performance reporting, and all of that kind of thing. And if you're not showing them clearly that your online course can do that, it's not the online bit that's the problem. It's the transformations and the features and the benefits that are.
So it's more the sales mechanism and how I sell it, which is the issue, not the online course itself.
Yeah, the online course. I mean, I've got people who are selling, a wonderful variety of niches to corporate organizations.
Yes, you have some good examples for us.
Well, this is the thing, right? So we've got one of my clients, Julie Dennis. She's amazing. She specializes in menopause and teaching organizations about menopause awareness, about menopause education, and about menopause communication and policy. Now, that's a very, very different area. If you'd have looked 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen any menopause consultants anywhere, because it's not a topic that anybody, myself included, particularly thinks of talking about. It's just not something that comes up in a corporate environment. But she's been super successful. And actually, Julie started when there was nobody else talking about menopause in that space. And every company that she spoke to was a bit like, what?
Why should a company buy a menopause course?
Yeah, what? And she's been incredibly successful, and she's one of the most sought after people in her industry because, she's actually hosted panel discussions with the House of Lords. She has chaired some incredible discussions. She's a regular speaker. She was just speaking at the Women in Technology event, and that's on a very, very niche area. And she sells passive income products to corporate organizations in a very interesting niche. We have one of our participants who focuses on well-being and nutrition. It's a lady called Holly Dunn. So Holly focuses specifically around women's health and women's nutrition within organizations to increase performance. And she actually specializes in working with the public sector organizations. And she delivers webinars, live webinars for a variety of public sector organizations. Again, very sought after in her space, doing incredibly well. She only joined my program last January. She's been selling regularly to some of the UK's biggest public sector organizations. But again, in a very, very, what we would normally term as unlikely niche, and with a delivery method that we now make the assumption is new to corporates, even though it isn't. So she's delivering live webinars, automated webinars, things like that. And then we have other people who are delivering more traditional, products and services around productivity, around mindset, executive coaching, change management. The delivery method hasn't been an issue. And corporates aren't seeing it's being delivered as an online course or webinar or whatever as the problem. It's about knowing how exactly are we generating those corporate leads that are qualified in the first place. How are we running through that business development process in a way that means that we're actually establishing the real solution to their problem. And if that is an online course that you happen to be selling, great. And if it's not, give them something else, because you cannot just shoehorn a product in there.
Yeah.
And then thinking about how you actually navigate the rest of that process, writing your proposal, making sure that it's giving you the best chance of success, actually doing the sales work, any negotiation that needs to be done, that you're navigating that in the best way and the most efficient way. We recently had a great example of a chap who lives in Germany. He's amazing. He works in the sales arena. So he's in my program and he's teaching a different aspect of sales to corporate organizations. And one of the things that we get people to work on is cash injection process and selling an offer, an immediately needed offer into cold organizations that don't know them. And so he went out and did this. And within 3 weeks, he'd signed a 60K contract.
Wow.
60,000. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
That initial piece. So actually, this can be done. It's not, again, not the delivery method. It's not, he's not having to reduce that because it's virtual. There's nothing going on there. It's because that sales process is clear. The benefits are clear. The transformation is clear. And that is what corporates are looking for. So if you're walking out and you're going, oh, well, you're trying to do the, influencer marketing, which is popular in the B2C space, it doesn't work B2B.
No, of course.
That's just how it is.
Yeah, but I think it's the limiting belief I was actually covering this topic earlier today. Limiting belief that if I am not there in person and it's not my time, then it's not worth money.
It's a really interesting one. And actually, it was funny because I've just been running a planning during adversity session with my program participants. So we were talking about this today in a similar way, as in, if we rest, are we doing the right thing? Because shouldn't we be working all of the time and things like that? The mentality there, or the mindset there is problematic, because if you think that the only way that your time is valuable is if it is delivered face to face, means that you're not actually happy enough with the content quality that you are delivering. Because if you were happy with the information that you were providing and the content quality and the measurement of, or the ability for somebody else to measure the quality of that content and do the work and implement successfully, you being there, live or otherwise, doesn't make a difference. And that's what we have to start thinking about is this a mindset issue, or is this an underlying, am I actually happy with the quality of the work that I'm producing, the quality of the information I'm producing, the quality of the course that I've created? And if that's the case, I need to make some changes before I go out and keep selling it.
Yeah. I think it also often comes down to this repeating problem of women, especially women.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. So me being in person must make it better somehow.
And this is interesting, isn't it? Because I think particularly when it comes to women, we have an over delivery attitude, and that is because society does teach women to be the nurturers. And so for a lot of women, we put a lot of value on, if I'm not making other people feel good, or if I'm not doing the utmost possible to make somebody else's life easier, then I'm failing. And what we don't actually look at is, how can I prioritize myself? How can I prioritize the job that I am here to do and the results that I'm here to get? And those are very different things. When it comes to, am I enough? I mean, honestly, you're going to have days where you're great and you're going to have days where you're not, and that's just your perception. It doesn't actually change anybody else's external perception of who you are. So what you think about yourself and your enoughness is completely irrelevant, in all honesty, to what you're actually selling. Because I could wake up on Monday and go, oh my goodness, I've lost 2 pounds, I fit in my jeans, I'm really happy, I've run my best PB, whatever, and feel great. And I could on a Wednesday go, oh my goodness, I have a bad hair day, I don't think anyone's doing well, and it's not about what you think about who you are, or whether you're enough to do something, or whether your opinion is valuable or anything like that. It's about objectively looking at, how can I ensure when my clients buy this product or service, they are getting the best possible opportunity to get a result.
Yeah. And it does not require you to be there.
No, God, no. Honestly, I think my clients would be really upset if I was there. I would eat all of the snacks in the office. When I work with organizations, I have what I call a Peter tax, a pain in the ass tax. And if I have to show up and I'm not allowed to wear jeans to the organization, I charge them more, because I'm like, well, I like wearing jeans, and jeans are comfortable.
So, pain in the butt tax.
Pain in the ass tax, because that's how I want a business that runs around my life. That's why I built a business, and I'm very good at what I do. And so if you're going to make me work in a way, or want me to work in a way that's going to be uncomfortable or frustrating for me, I'm going to put a tax on that. So you can either pay that tax because it's uncomfortable or frustrating for me, or you let me work in the way I want to, and maybe it'll be cheaper.
Fabulous. So you say actually COVID hasn't really impacted you and your clients?
COVID actually has been great for my clients. And it's been really interesting. A lot of my clients have switched from selling primarily B2C, so business to consumer, to B2B. And they've been making sales consistently. They've been making bigger sales. They've been, and it sounds like a really pithy phrase, but changing the world, genuinely. A lot of my clients work in areas that have been really, really tough over 2020. So we have a lot of people working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And obviously, there were many incidents last year around the DEI space that were very, very challenging for organizations of people who work within them. And so they've been contributing massively to conversations around cross-cultural communication, generational bias, looking at unconscious bias and resolving that within some major companies, companies that are household names, household brands. We've also had people working in stress and resilience management who've worked with organizations that are supporting people on the front line. So with NHS and public sector roles, even construction firms, or obviously construction workers in the UK have been working throughout COVID. So that's been really, really challenging. They've been supporting people on really, really solid levels in a variety of different areas to make sure that those people looked after. We have a lovely lady called Gemma Stowe who has been working with organisations in the housing market to help women step up and promote themselves and to get internal promotions, which has been awesome. And watching, women increase visibility within organisations, helping to bridge that gender bias and reduce the gender pay gap. And that's been awesome. And we have two ladies, Ashanti Du and Michelle Gamia, who've been working on, they actually met inside the program and they decided to design a race journal, which was awesome for organizations to use to address the idea of race within organizations and answer some of the questions that people don't like to ask because they feel awkward or uncomfortable, or they don't want to make somebody else feel awkward or uncomfortable. And so actually it's been a really, really incredible time to watch people do things in organizations that are genuinely changing hundreds and thousands of employees' lives versus, feeling like their skills are undervalued in the B2C space. And that is what we see sometimes, when people don't understand the importance of accountancy or HR or change management or, risk management and things in the online entrepreneur space. People can start to feel like their work isn't valued or it isn't needed, or, perhaps they were overpaid in that corporate job they used to have. And so watching them go into companies and really change the way that they're operating and actually add value to people's lives, it has been huge. Really, really huge.
I think the theme that comes up for me as you're sharing this is just seeing the opportunity in the crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting because I know that we spoke about this at the beginning of COVID, actually, this idea of profiteering from a crisis. And there's a big difference between profiting from a crisis and actually understanding that the value you have to add still deserves to be paid for. Just because times are tough, it doesn't mean that you can work for free. And so, I think the example I used back then was, if you've got a hand sanitizer company and you're jacking it up to £10 for a tiny pot, yes, you are absolutely.
That's not business. No.
Well, that's it. And that is sleazy and it is gross and it's capitalizing on crisis and nobody likes that. But if you are selling a service that actually organizations need and perhaps haven't prioritized before because they weren't aware of the situation, or they weren't adequately educated around what needed to change, or they hadn't thought about how they could resolve that problem differently, that's not profiteering from a crisis. That's just doing your normal awareness, education, building that need and demonstrating a clear solution.
Yeah. And what do you see happening 2021?
2021's already been big. So I've been back a week. I've had clients that have already sold 30K retainers to corporate companies. We've had somebody sell their first 5K deal. We've got people booking in business development calls. We've got people who've been just making consistent sales from the 4th of January. I think people came back. I came back on the 6th, I think. So it's been huge, and I don't see it slowing down. The great thing about the B2B space is that what we've seen consistently is that companies have been managing COVID and managing the effects of COVID relatively well, given the circumstances. The economy was always going to shift. And so we are seeing in the media, and have been for, 8 months, mass reports of, unfortunately, redundancy and people losing out on employment. And that will continue to happen in areas like retail, in areas like hospitality and things. And that is a horrible, horrible effect of COVID. It's actually not indicative at all that companies will go bankrupt and things like that. That's just demonstrating that companies are trying to survive, and that they will be surviving. And what they're doing is cutting overhead costs and cutting people costs until the time is right to bring people back. So companies right now are buying. They're buying at a relatively rapid rate. The signs are all very good, because obviously companies that had projects on hold last year are going to have to make them happen this year. They can't just not do things. And that's the unfortunate reality, I guess, if organizations are watching. They do have to commit to certain projects, and they do just have to get things done. They're hiring more external suppliers than ever before. And in fact, the rate of spend is about 1.2 trillion indicative spend for external supply to organizations in 2021. So that's quite a lot of revenue that is expected to be generated. And the great news is that companies are looking at a range of suppliers now, rather than just going with the traditional options, because they are seeing how flexible and how able to adapt smaller organizations are and solopreneurs are, and how much value they've got to add to the workplace. So yeah, my job is busy right now.
I think that's a perfect end to an amazing interview, Jessica. Thank you for sharing how COVID has maybe not impacted, or impacted you positively and your clients, and how we should actually be positive about the opportunities and changes coming along.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been epic.
Thank you.